That day started just like any other peaceful weekend. The house basked in a serene stillness, illuminated by soft rays of sunlight streaming through the windows. A gentle breeze whispered in from outside, carrying with it a sense of calm. I relished the quiet solitude, believing I had the house all to myself. It felt like the perfect opportunity to tackle some overdue cleaning. The floors begged to be swept. A thin layer of dust clung stubbornly to the furniture, and the kitchen demanded a thorough scrub. Mom had left earlier, her schedule full of errands. Jay, my stepbrother, had made it clear he wouldn't be back until late. "Don't wait up," he had said casually before heading out, his tone as nonchalant as ever. With the entire day stretched out before me, free from interruptions, I tied my hair back, put on my favorite playlist, and rolled up my sleeves. The music played softly in the background as I got to work, each rhythmic sweep of the broom echoing the promise of a productive morning. The house felt different in its emptiness, quieter, calmer, as if it belonged solely to me for a while. I hummed along to the music, basking in the rare tranquility, the simple act of cleaning, with no one to create new messes or demand my attention, felt oddly therapeutic. I even allowed myself to plan the rest of the day, a well-deserved snack after finishing my chores, followed by some uninterrupted time curled up with a good book. Everything about the morning felt so ordinary, so perfectly predictable, or so I thought. I had just started sweeping the living room floor when a sound broke through the music. It was faint but unmistakable, the creak of the front door opening. I froze mid-motion, the broom suspended in midair as my heart skipped a beat. Surely, I must have imagined it. Mom wasn't due back for hours, and Jay had assured us he'd be out all day. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. "Mom," called out tentatively, my voice cutting through the silence. There was no response, just the soft hum of the playlist and the faint rustle of footsteps. My pulse quickened, and I gripped the broom like a lifeline. Moments later, the source of the sound emerged. Jay strolled into the room, his demeanor as casual as ever, a bag slung over one shoulder. "Hey," he said, tossing his bag onto the couch without a second thought. I stared at him, bewildered. "What are you doing here? I thought you were out with your friends." "Plans changed," he replied with a shrug, his lips curling into a faint smirk. The serene morning I had envisioned shifted in an instant. The house, once my haven of quiet, felt different now, as if Jay's unexpected presence had unsettled its balance. He flopped onto the couch, his relaxed posture in stark contrast to my lingering unease. I resumed sweeping, though my focus was broken. The steady rhythm of the broom against the floor failed to drown out the peculiar tension in the air. Jay's gaze followed me, unrelenting, his eyes tracing every movement with an intensity one couldn't quite place. "Need help?" he asked suddenly, his voice laced with a playful undertone that felt strangely out of place. "I've got it," I replied, a little too quickly. My voice betrayed none of the nervous energy bubbling beneath the surface, but I couldn't ignore the heat creeping into my cheeks. Jay leaned back further, his arm draped over the back of the couch, his smirk lingering. Usually, he'd either disappear into his room or occupy himself with his phone, but today was different. He wasn't just watching, he was observing, as though he were searching for something. I tried to ignore him, focusing instead on sweeping up the imaginary dust that seemed to multiply under my broom. Yet, the silence stretched between us, growing heavier by the second. Then, out of nowhere, Jay broke it. His voice was quieter now, more deliberate. "Do you ever think about us?" The question caught me off guard. I paused mid-sweep, gripping the broom tightly as his words sank in. It wasn't the kind of thing Jay usually said, and the weight of his tone suggested he wasn't joking. "Think about us?" I echoed, trying to mask my confusion. "Yeah," he said, his eyes never leaving mine. "I mean, how things are, how they could be." The air between us grew thicker, charged with an unfamiliar tension. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. Instead, I stood there, frozen, wondering where this conversation was headed, and why it felt like we had crossed an invisible line that couldn't be undone. The question hit me like a wave, unexpected and overwhelming. My hand froze mid-sweep. The broom clutched tightly as his words echoed in the quiet room. For a moment, I wasn't sure if I'd misheard him, but his expression left no doubt. Slowly, almost mechanically, I turned to face him. Confusion and unease etched into every line of my face. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice unsteady, the words barely audible. Jay was sitting on the couch, his elbows resting on his knees. He didn't avoid my gaze, but there was a weight in his eyes that I couldn't decipher, calm yet intense. His look seemed to hold more than what he was saying, as if he was testing the waters before diving into something much deeper. "I mean," he began, his voice quieter now, tinged with a hesitation that I wasn't used to hearing from him. "Do you ever think about how things might be different if we weren't step-siblings?" The words hung in the air like a spark threatening to ignite something I wasn't ready to confront. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the question, trying to fill the silence with logic or reason. "Why would I think about that?" I finally managed, my voice barely hiding the nervous edge that had crept in. Jay gave a soft laugh, but it wasn't one of amusement. It was awkward, almost self-conscious, and it only added to the tension growing between us. "I don't know," he said, running a hand through his hair in a gesture that betrayed his nervousness. "It's just something that's been on my mind." His words felt like a stone dropped into the still water of our relationship, sending ripples outward in every direction. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier, and I was acutely aware of how close we were. I gripped the broom tighter, as if it could anchor me to the moment, keep me from being swept away by the undercurrent of emotions I didn't want to face. "Jay, I started, but the words caught in my throat. How was I supposed to respond to something like that? How could I articulate the storm of thoughts and feelings crashing inside me? Jay leaned forward, his posture casual, but his voice anything but. "You're always so busy," he said. "School, work, cleaning, taking care of everything. Do you ever stop and think about what you want? What you need?" His question felt like a mirror, forcing me to confront things I wasn't ready to see. What did I want? What did I need? The truth was, I didn't know, and I wasn't sure I wanted to find out. "Jay," I said, my voice firmer now, though still tinged with uncertainty. "What are you trying to say?" He stood up slowly, each movement deliberate and measured, as if he was giving me time to process. When he reached me, he stopped, just close enough to invade my space but not enough to cross an invisible line. His expression wasn't playful or teasing like it usually was. Instead, it was serious, almost intense, and it made my pulse quicken. "I think about you a lot," he said finally, his voice steady and low, carrying a weight that made my chest tighten. His words hit me like a physical force, leaving me breathless. For a second, I wondered if I'd imagined them, but the look in his eyes told me otherwise. My heart raced, my mind scrambling for something to hold on to, some way to ground myself in a moment that felt unreal. "Jay," I began, my voice trembling. "You're my stepbrother." The words felt hollow, like they were supposed to mean more than they did. "We're not related by blood," he replied softly, his tone almost pleading, as if he was trying to convince both of us. "That doesn't make this right," I said, stepping back instinctively, needing space to think, to breathe. But even as I said the words, a small, traitorous part of me wondered if I was trying to convince him or myself. "I know," Jay said, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I know it's not right, but I can't help how I feel." For the rest of the day, we avoided each other, the tension between us like a shadow that neither of us could escape. I stayed in my room, trying to focus on anything but the conversation, but his words echoed in my mind, refusing to be ignored. That evening, he cornered me in the kitchen. His face was set, determined, and I knew there was no avoiding this. "We need to talk," he said. "About what?" I asked, though I already knew. "About us," he replied. His words were a crack in the dam I'd been trying to hold together. As he spoke, opening up about feelings he'd been burying for so long. I felt something stir within me, a quiet, secret part of myself that I'd never acknowledged. But even as part of me wanted to give in, to explore whatever it was between us, another part was terrified. This wasn't just about us. It was about our family, about the lines we were crossing and the consequences we might face. "Jay, we can't," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. But even as I said the words, I knew that something between us had already shifted. There was no going back now. Despite all my efforts to avoid him, it seemed like fate was playing some cruel game. We kept running into each other, over and over again, all around the house. It was as if the universe itself was determined to make our paths cross at every turn. Each time we did, the tension between us grew more palpable, thick enough to cut through with a knife. There was an unspoken understanding that something was shifting, something neither of us could control. But we didn't talk about it. We just let the silence build up around us, until it felt almost suffocating. One evening, as I made my way down the hallway toward my room, the soft, fading light of the day barely lit the space around me. The air was cooler, the kind of quiet that only comes at dusk when the world seems to hold its breath. I was lost in thought, my mind still reeling from the weirdness of our recent encounters, when I suddenly heard footsteps behind me. First, I thought it was just my imagination, but the sound grew louder, closer, unmistakable. I glanced over my shoulder, my heart racing for reasons I couldn't explain. And there he was, Jay. He was walking toward me with his usual confident stride, but his expression was different. It was hard to read, a mixture of determination, maybe even frustration, and something else I couldn't quite place. It was as if he was carrying some weight, and yet, he wasn't saying anything. "Hey," I started to speak, my voice almost trembling, unsure of what to say after all the tension that had been building. But before the word could even leave my lips completely, he stepped closer, closing the distance between us in a way that felt deliberate, almost like he was making a point to be near me. "Wait," he said, his voice softer than I expected, but still firm enough to stop me in my tracks. It was a simple command, but there was an intensity behind it that made me pause. I looked up at him, confusion swirling in my mind, trying to figure out what was happening, what he wanted. But before I could ask, before my brain could even catch up with the moment, he leaned in. It all happened so fast. 1 second, he was standing there, and the next, time seemed to slow, stretching the moment into something that felt surreal. His face was so close to mine, and then, without warning, his lips were on mine. It was soft at first, almost like a question, a tentative kiss, as if he was gauging my reaction, testing the waters. But then it deepened. The hesitation melted away, replaced by something more assertive, more certain, like he was no longer asking permission but simply acting on what had been building between us for so long. I stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. My mind, once so full of questions and confusion, seemed to scatter into 1,000 pieces. The kiss was unlike anything I had ever experienced, intense, yet gentle, as if every touch was meant to speak a language neither of us could fully understand yet both knew instinctively. It felt like something out of a dream, the kind of dream that you don't realize you've been having until you're already in the middle of it. My heart pounded loudly in my chest, and I was certain that he could hear it, could feel it, because it seemed to echo in the silence between us. The world around us seemed to disappear, leaving only the two of us standing in that charged, timeless space. I didn't know how to react. I didn't know what to do with all the feelings flooding me, everything I had never expected to feel. It was a moment that had been a long time in the making, yet I had never been prepared for it. When he finally pulled back, it was as though the air had shifted, and I could breathe again, though the weight of everything still hung between us. His eyes searched mine, looking for something, some kind of response that I couldn't give. I wanted to speak, to say something that would make sense of all this, but my words were trapped somewhere inside me, tangled with the confusion and the emotions that had taken over. I opened my mouth, trying to form a sentence, but nothing came out. There was no explanation, no easy way to process what had just happened. My mind was a whirlwind: shock, disbelief, and something else I couldn't name yet. Jay didn't speak either. He simply stood there, watching me with those dark, unreadable eyes, waiting. In that quiet moment, the space between us heavy with unspoken words, I realized something. Everything had changed. There was no going back from this, no undoing what had just happened. The boundaries that had once existed between us were gone, erased in that single moment. Whatever had been building, whatever had been unsaid for so long, had broken free, and there was no unfeeling it. Everything was different now, and deep down, I knew it was just the beginning. Thank you for taking the time to watch our videos. If you find the content useful and interesting, don't forget to like, share, and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new videos. Our channel will always update attractive, inspiring, and useful content for you. Click the bell icon to receive notifications as soon as there are new videos. Your support is the biggest motivation for us to continue to develop. Thank you and see you in the next videos.